Hello dear patients, your favorite doctor here, Dr. Plague, and once again we find ourselves taking a look at the past year and all the wonderful and not so wonderful gaming experiences that it left us. That's right, you're all welcome to the Plague Awards 2023, the most prestigious and important awards in the industry. Suck it, Keely. Now, I'm sure you have been bombarded with multiple Game of the Year lists. However, I like to stray far away from all the habitual selections, so don't expect to see games like Gollum, Rise of Kong, The Walking Dead or Redfall here, even that I would never play a bad game on purpose just to put it in a list at the end of the year. What you get here are my genuine impressions of the games I personally played on 2023. So, without further ado, let's check out the best and the most disappointing games of 2023. Okay, before we begin with our first award, we have a bit of a problem here. See, this past year was just fantastic for games, and since I wasn't interested in the games that ended up being a disaster, there are not a lot of bad things to mention, only a few disappointments, so I hope that you're still in the mood for some positive stuff and that you don't miss my brutal style of slandering too much. I will dread the day when I have to talk about a lot of shitty games in one of these videos. With that in mind, let's check who our first winner is. The award for our first great game goes to WrestleQuest. If you consumed even a bit of my content, you know that I'm a huge fan of professional wrestling, and when this game was announced, I was the happiest person alive. WrestleQuest is an RPG where you take control of two different main characters, Muchacho Man, an obvious homage to Macho Man Randy Savage, and Brink Logan, who might be inspired by Bret the Hitman Hart. Both characters coming from different contexts but with a common goal, to save the world of professional wrestling. Funnily enough, the game takes place in a toy world, and the characters are all action figures, recreating that feeling of nostalgia from playing with toys when you were a kid. The game takes a lot of inspiration from old school RPGs while blending perfectly the wrestling team mechanics, so the combat is turn-based and you can choose from a variety of different techniques like normal strikes, taunts, special moves, tag moves that require to be performed by 2 or 3 characters, and, as it couldn't be missing in a wrestling game, the pin. While you can defeat some enemies by just reducing their HP to 0, some others must be pinned. There are some other mechanics related to wrestling like the hype meter, which punishes you for using the same move repeatedly and represents the characters getting over with the crowd watching the fight. You can also customize your character's entrance and style of combat. Hell, when you get to a boss fight, you even have to cut a promo on the boss. I could spend all day listing all the references and insider terms included in the game, but I'll just leave you with this. If you're a fan of wrestling, this is definitely a must-have. And if you like your RPGs with a lot of quirky humor but you're not a wrestling fan, there's still a lot to enjoy here. Wow, that was excellent. Very well deserved. Let's take a look at our second winner of the night. Alright, seems like we're moving into dangerous tides for this one. Our next great game award goes to Dredge. This is one of the games I played most recently, and I have to say that it completely blew me away. Dredge is a fishing horror game? It is true that the game is a bit hard to categorize, but its gameplay loop is incredibly addictive. You play as a faceless fisherman who, by some whims of destiny, ends up stranded in a small island called Great Marrow. With your ship completely destroyed, the mayor of the town offers you a deal. He'll let you use one of the island boats, but you have to pay it with work. And how do you earn money? By selling fish, of course. Sure, at first it doesn't sound really exciting. You explore a very limited section of the sea, barely being able to get a couple fish in shallow waters, and the fishing mechanic is really simple. How is this scary, you may ask? Well, paying off debts is pretty scary per se, but the real horror of this game lies in its Lovecraftian atmosphere. See, you didn't get stranded on an island out of nowhere, and soon you find out that it's unwise to sail at night, as your character starts to panic and lose his sanity, and weird creatures and hallucinations start popping out at sea. However, you must also traverse the seas at night to find better fish and go on long travels. And here's when the gameplay loop really catches you. Whoa, tough public. So, what's the deal with airline food? As I was saying, you need to catch and sell fish in order to improve your boat and be able to catch fish in other types of biomes and depths. You also have to make sure you visit the nearby islands to get some side quests that will help you either get more money or improvement materials, and also continue the main quests of the game. As you progress through the story, you'll find different characters in need of help and some frankly horrifying eldritch abominations, and even though the gameplay loop remains mostly the same with some small variations depending on the requirements of the main quest, it is really hard to put down the controller, because there's always that mystery of the weird fish you'll find in the next biome. How will the next region look like? How will the story progress? And without spoiling anything related to the plot, the ending of this game left me with an existential dread and horror that is difficult to describe. Definitely one of the best indie horror games of the last few years. Alright, I wish I could say that I can finally wash away the stench of fish from my clothes, but not everything can be good in this awards ceremony, right? And we will check out the unfortunate winner of the first disappointing game of 2023. Before announcing the game, let me make something perfectly clear. These are not objectively bad games. One of them is actually pretty good. However, my expectations for them might have been higher, or they just didn't deliver on what was actually promised by the developers. So, the first unfortunate winner of the Disappointing Game Award goes to Fire Emblem Engage. Aww. The Fire Emblem games started gaining traction on the West a while ago, and it has become one of Nintendo's top franchises in the modern era. I once mentioned that Three Houses is one of my favorite games ever, so when Engage was announced, I was very excited, and honestly, I was expecting a masterpiece in the same vein as Three Houses. However, Fire Emblem Engage falls short in its predecessor's main strength, its story. Three Houses takes you on an epic journey where you become a teacher in an academy, train and create bonds with your students, and then join a brutal war with high stakes and consequences. Look, I might be a bit biased towards Three Houses, but I felt that Engage lacked a lot of that charm. The game looks nice and the gameplay is butter smooth, with the Engage mechanic adding a lot of dynamism to the battles, but let's be honest, the Sanctuary can't possibly compare to the Academy in terms of a hub. And while I understand that it would be weird taking the role of a teacher 2 games in a row, the teaching aspect was sorely missed on my part. Nevertheless, I could forgive all of that, everything, but the dialogues, dear God, the fucking dialogues in this game are horrible. From the very first moment your character wakes up, everyone around is getting on their knees and sucking your dick for being the divine dragon. For the people in this game, you are the most magnificent being to ever exist. The lines of dialogue border on cringe because of how the characters are always amazed at how powerful, awesome, and beautiful you are. You might think that I'm overreacting, but this is a shared general opinion among the community, and believe it or not, this affects the storytelling and general plot of the game, leaving some moments that should have been impactful or deeply tragic as just moments. I'd still recommend the game if you like your strategy RPGs, given that, well, it's a Fire Emblem game and it excels in the gameplay department as it is expected from the series. However, if the story of a game is really important for you and you like well-developed characters, just keep this in mind.
Hiya, papaya! Hiya, papaya? Huh.
Now, that was a bit of a downer, so let's cheer up with other 2 great games that deserve their own category. Yes, they are that good. So, let's open the envelope to see the second best Metroidvania of the year. And the winner is Blasphemous 2. Now we're entering true Game of the Year territory. Blasphemous 2 is the long-awaited sequel to the original Blasphemous, and back when it was announced, I wondered, How are they going to improve on something that is already at the top of greatness? Well, the game kitchen must have a very good alchemist in their hands, because they crafted the perfect recipe to improve on every aspect of the previous game. You play with the Penitent One once again, and you embark on a quest to defeat the Miracle once and for all. But before you do that, you must defeat the first Penitent and the 4 members of the Archicofradia, as well as some other powerful enemies along the way. So, what is the big deal with this particular sequel? The answer is very simple. They greatly improved the mobility and combat options of the game. In the first Blasphemous, you had the basic abilities of jumping and using your sword, the almighty Mea Culpa, both for combat and traversal in the form of sticking it into wooden walls to climb. However, for this sequel, you can choose between 3 different weapons. Veredicto, a giant censer that acts as a heavy swingable weapon, Sarmiento and Centella, a quick sword and dagger combo, and Ruego al Alba, a balanced curved sword which is the one that acts more similarly to Mea Culpa. Apart from having different movesets for combat, each weapon has a special ability that will help you in traversing the world, like making platforms appear by hitting a bell, teleporting between mirrors, and destroying wooden blockages respectively. But wait, there's more! The Penitent One himself also has some new traversal abilities that are unlocked as you progress throughout the story, like an air dash and double jump. The bosses are just outstanding, with exhilarating battles and some with multiple phases to overcome, which greatly benefit from having multiple weapon options to defeat them. This game is truly a work of love and evolution from its previous entry. The only 2 things that I could criticize a little bit about the game are that the areas seem a bit smaller compared to the first game, and also the lack of a New Game Plus feature to encourage replayability. But given that New Game Plus was added as a free DLC in the first game, I'm taking a guess that we will receive this feature down the line. I wholeheartedly recommend you to check out this game in case you haven't played it yet, and the fact that this game didn't get a nomination for the Game Awards only shows what a joke that event is. Wow, if such a masterpiece got 2nd place, then who is going to take the big award home? Well, I guess all we have to do in this moment is to have a little faith. And the winner for 2023's Best Metroidvania goes to The Last Fate. Now this is exquisite. 2023 finally saw the release of this long-anticipated Metroidvania, which the best way I can describe is 2D Bloodborne. That's it, that's the game, let's move on. Okay, but seriously, The Last Fate is the perfect blend of Castlevania and Bloodborne, which gives as a result a wonderful experience full of beautiful yet dreary scenery, monstrous enemies, and, as it couldn't be any other way, an ass-kicking of brutal difficulty. In this game, you play as Eric, a cursed man who has to traverse an unknown land to find a cure for his unusual disease. Sounds familiar? Hey, I'm not joking when I say this game is 2D Bloodborne. In this game, you have a wide arsenal of weapons and abilities to suit your playstyle, so you can go for a brute strength build with great swords, skill with katanas or daggers, rely on the use of magic and spells, etc. Oh, and did I mention you also have a gun as your default secondary weapon, even though you can parry enemies with it, but it's still a very useful tool. This isn't a particularly long game, as it shouldn't take you more than 20 or 30 hours to beat, depending on your skill level, but every single moment of it is highly enjoyable. The areas all have a very distinct look despite all being clearly inspired in a gothic Victorian aesthetic. The exploration feels rewarding due to all of the different traversal skills you unlock, like double jump, wall jump and air dash, and the bosses. The bosses in this game are some of the most challenging I faced this year. Due to the multiple variants in regards to weapons and build, your experience with each boss may vary, but there are a couple that will test your mettle no matter how you approach them, with challenging attack patterns and multiple phases. Another thing that I absolutely must mention is the art style, because just look at it, the pixel art in this game is just beyond gorgeous, and the music is stellar too. But again, as with Blasphemous 2, there are a couple points I need to mention in a not so positive light. The story of the game, as with all Souls-inspired games, is very convoluted and cryptic, taking a minimalistic approach based on world building, NPC conversations and item descriptions, and while some stories are understandable in a base level without doing the extra effort, this one is not the case, which actually connects to the other problem I want to mention, the lack of a new game plus mode, as if you fail or miss one or various NPC questlines, you'll have to start the game again from zero in order to complete everything. Also, I got this game on Switch, given that I like having this type of experiences available both in my house and on the go. However, there are quite some technical hiccups on the platform, from deep FPS drops to graphical glitches and crashes. I'm not informed if these issues happen in other consoles or PC, but it's something to keep in mind. Nevertheless, without a shadow of a doubt, this is a game that just set out a new standard for the genre, and that's something that shouldn't go unnoticed. If you love Metroidvanias, Souls-like games and a gothic vibe, definitely go for this game, you won't regret it. Also, I documented all my journey with this particular game, so if you'd like to see a full commentary or review of this game, let me know in the comments below, and also subscribe if you like this type of content, as it truly helps a starving artist like me. Moving on, it's time for another stinker, or in this case, a big sleeper. A game can be extremely good or incredibly bad and still amount for some fun, even if it's for completely wrong reasons. I do think though that one of the worst sins that a game can commit is being boring, not sparking any emotion from the player, and that's the case for the game we're going to check out. So, try to keep awake for this one, as the award for the most boring game of the year goes to Starfield. Let me make something perfectly clear. I don't think that Starfield is a bad game. A lot of people really enjoyed it, and that's okay. If you like getting bored out of your mind and falling asleep with a controller on your hands, that is. There was a lot of hype for Starfield before its release, but believe me, if it wasn't for the fact that this game is on Game Pass, I would have never even tried it. The Bethesda formula has been stale for quite a while if you ask me, and this quote-unquote new IP is just trying to mix the overused formula of The Elder Scrolls and Fallout, but in space. Well, if you hate it so much, why did you even try? I can picture some of you Starfield lovers out there asking in a blind fit of rage, and there's actually a reason for that. Before the game came out, there were articles and videos stating that you could be a space pirate, going around the galaxy, pillaging, stealing ships and engaging in space combat, and while that is technically true, well, it's not as engaging as it sounds. Starfield is an action RPG in the vein of Bethesda's big two IPs, but oh, this time is in space. And as it's now common for big fat liar Todd Howard, he promised a lot of things that were half-assed into the game. A compelling story? The story of this game is bland and uneventful, as most of their other games. Interesting NPCs with lots of dialogue choices? Nope. One-note characters that stare at you with dead eyes while they ramble on about uneventful things. Space traversal? You cannot even land on the fucking planets organically. It is just a menu choosing where you want to go, and that's it. You can fly around the planets looking for other ships and satellites, if you can even call that flying, but that's about it. What about the ship combat? Non-existent. You only push buttons to constantly shoot and other to repair your ship, because you can't even maneuver your ship freely enough to aim and avoid enemy damage. That's not being a space pirate. On a completely different yet related note, this year I played Ratchet & Clank: A Cracking Time for the PS3, and let me tell you that a game from 2009 has better space traversal and combat than Starfield. The game has many other things, like that idiotic encumbrance system that is Bethesda's signature cherry on top of a diarrhea shake and brain-dead AI, but the game isn't even bad enough to be funny in a glitchy Bethesda way. It's just incredibly boring. So not even being on Game Pass can make me recommend this, unless you suffer from insomnia and need something that makes you fall asleep immediately. What? Oh shit. Must have fallen asleep while talking about that bad space soap opera. But it's time to get our magic back, because we're near the end of the ceremony and now we're entering kinda double and triple A territory with the next games we have in store. With that in mind, prepare yourselves, because our next winner for Great Game of 2023 award is Hogwarts Legacy. Ah, the wonders of the wizarding world. Apart from being a huge wrestling fan, I am also a big Harry Potter fan. In hindsight, it's no wonder Miss Blake decided to break up with me. Anyway, it's been a long time since we had a decent, let alone good Harry Potter game. The first 3 movie tie-ins were excellent, but they dropped the ball with Goblet of Fire and it all went downhill from there, until the LEGO Harry Potter games came out and gave us a chance to explore the entirety of Hogwarts and some of its surroundings. Well, Hogwarts Legacy is an action RPG with an open world that truly let us explore the entirety of the castle and its surrounding area, with some notable exceptions like the Black Lake or the Chamber of Secrets, but I digress. It is worth noting that this game, while taking place in the Potter universe, doesn't take place in the same timeline that we all know and love, rather taking place 100 years before the main story told in the books, and we follow a new 5th-year student who gets entangled in a nefarious conspiracy by a goblin and a dark wizard to get hold of an ancient source of power. The story of the game is pretty interesting, taking some dark twists and turns in some places, depending on your choices, but there are also a lot of mini side quests and side stories you can find around the castle and the neighboring areas. One's a bit related to the main story, like my beautiful darling Poppy and her plan to take down the operations of beast poachers, and others like a bratty student asking you to retrieve some magical plants to make cream for pimples so she doesn't have to suffer seeing her classmates with acne. Hogwarts is truly a school full of variety. The combat of the game is also interesting, as you have a variety of different spells for combat with color coding, which makes it that you don't just button mash the normal spell, but some enemies have shields that can only be damaged by one type of spell, or some magical beasts that are weak to different spells, like spiders being weak to fire. Of course, this game needed to have giant spiders preventing me from playing it at night. You can also customize your character with different equipment and make it look fashionable as hell or as ridiculous as humanly possible, and there is also the option to change the look of your current equipment in case you find some legendary hat or scarf that just doesn't go with the rest of your outfit. Now, I am aware that this game has been accused of being just another open world game full of busy work to do, and I can understand that. In the map you see a lot of different waypoints for hidden treasures, side quests, spots for beast taming, Merlin trials, etc. However, all of these extra activities are completely optional and don't really get in the way of your regular playthrough if you just want to follow the main quest and explore the faithfully recreated castle. It is your adventure to make, after all, so optional stuff shouldn't be a detriment for the main experience. One last detail that I want to mention is that, of course, you can learn the 3 unforgivable curses in this game if you desire, and you can bet your ass I went out of my way to do so, because I love chaos and destruction. Whether you're looking for an action RPG full of magical creatures and a story full of mystery, or you are just a big Harry Potter fan, I can 100% recommend you to play this game as soon as possible. That was certainly a magical experience. Yet, if you're craving for something more dreary and darker, a game that pushes you to your absolute limits, maybe our next winner will satisfy your needs, as the award for my second best game of 2023 goes to none other than Lies of P. I'll be upfront with you, this game is truly something special. Back when it was revealed, everyone coined the term Pinocchio-born, and now that we have the game with us, I can say that is a pretty accurate description of the game. In case you've been living under a rock, Lies of P is an action RPG with an obvious inspiration in Bloodborne, but also in Sekiro. The game puts you in control of Pinocchio himself, as you traverse the city of Graz to try to stop the rebellion of the puppets and the darker plot that hides behind it. If you have played any Souls-like games before, you already know what to expect in Lies of P. You have various options regarding weapons and playstyles to approach combat, and now you also have the help of your prosthetic arm, which gives you various additional tools. However, this game has more in common with Sekiro than you think, given that one of its most important mechanics is pairing enemy attacks to deplete their posture. Once their posture is depleted, you can perform a critical attack for massive damage, and As an additional detail, performing correct parries can also lead to your enemy's weapon breaking, which greatly reduces the damage they deal to you. It's a risk-reward tactic that worked perfectly for me, even though I heard some friends that went full dodge mode without any problem. However, some of the enemy attack patterns were too quick for me to dodge correctly. The environments in this game are just gorgeous and detailed, and the level design is what you'd expect from a game inspired by the Souls series, with large areas with multiple shortcuts and hidden passages and plenty of enemies and secret items to reward exploration. There are two specific aspects I'd like to highlight for this game, the first one being, of course, the bosses. As it couldn't be any other way, the bosses in this game are varied and absolutely brutal. You have giant machines, humanoid puppets, giant beasts, and strange abominations, each one with their own patterns and mechanics. Some of the bosses have two faces with individual health bars, which is brutal if you don't manage your healing and resources properly, and even though I love this game, I can't deny that I got extremely frustrated a couple of times with the difficulty of some bosses, and can say without a shadow of a doubt that this might be the hardest Souls-like game I have ever played. But there was one thing keeping me from going insane from banging my head against the wall, and that's the second aspect I want to highlight from this game, and that is the soundtrack. One of the mechanics of the game is giving you the chance to lie or tell the truth in specific moments, and as puppets cannot lie, lying gives you humanity, and in some occasions, mostly related to NPC questlines, this provides you with vinyls, which you can play in the main hub of the game, Hotel Kratz. And the songs are just beautiful. I'll never forget playing the first vinyl I got, a song named Feel, and just staring up by how sad and melancholic it sounded. Coming back to the hotel was always a nice experience, knowing the music you had collected was waiting to be played in the background. This game deserves many awards for the music alone. So, if for some reason you haven't experienced this game, do yourself a favor and play it right now. It is included on Game Pass, so there's no reason not to go ahead and enjoy this masterpiece. Now, this is something that deeply saddens me, and that is giving the award for the most disappointing game of 2023. As I previously mentioned, the usual suspects for worst game of the year won't be seen here, given that I didn't play them. Instead, I'm going to present a very obscure game that probably not a lot of people have heard about. Are you ready? The winner for most disappointing game of 2023 is The Smurfs 2: Prisoner of the Green Stone. I know what you're thinking. I can see the confusion in your eyes. Dear Doctor, how did you come across such an obscure game? Well, it's actually pretty simple. I was browsing YouTube as usual, looking for new potion recipes when I saw the recommendation for the game trailer. For some reason it got my interest, even though I hate the Smurfs with all my soul, and what I saw really surprised me. A mix of 3D platforming and third-person shooter? Like, are you telling me this is similar to Ratchet & Clank but with a Smurfs-themed skin? I immediately marked this game on my radar, pre-ordered it a week before launch, and recorded all of my gameplay because I was sure that I wanted to share this experience with all of you. And once I started writing the script for the video, realized what I had been trying to deny for a while. This game is incredibly mediocre. The game revolves around a group of Smurfs trying to save their land from a magical creature called Stolas, who was imprisoned in a green magical stone. It's nothing to write home about, but again, you can expect a deep story coming from a fucking Smurfs game. The gameplay is functional enough, but it gets repetitive very quickly due to the lack of stage and enemy variety. The theme of the stages only really changes when you're playing as a different Smurf, and the enemies are just variations of a single bug. So you have a small bug, a big bug, a small flying bug, big flying bug, huge flying bug. You catch my drift. Another thing that must be addressed are the technical issues. I got this game on my Series S rather than getting it on the Switch because I wanted to play it smoothly, which did not happen. Graphical glitches and FPS drops plagued my experience, and there were also instances where the cutscenes went mute, as if some specific lines of dialogue were not recorded. Another interesting thing I noticed while playing is that some text wasn't translated from French, specifically on the gun skilled stabs on the menu.
Le grill? What the hell is that?
Anyway, returning to the game experience itself, you can find some challenge portals in the levels to break the monotony up a little bit. However, these challenges are just as dull as the main game itself, if not worse. All you do is travel to an enclosed space with lots of enemies that you have to defeat in a specific time to earn either upgrade materials for your gun or a cosmetic item. These challenges feel like a wasted opportunity, given that they could have created some platforming and puzzle solving challenges as well. This game is not special at all, and has so little to talk about that it didn't even warrant making a proper video to talk about it. And even though I had some fun while playing it, I expected it to be this epic and exhilarating adventure from what I had seen on the trailers. Because of this, even though I enjoyed this game way more than Starfield, since I didn't really expect anything from Bethesda's boring opus to begin with, The Smurfs 2 Prisoner of the Greenstone is my most disappointing game of 2023. I truly can't recommend this game to anyone, not even if you just want to turn off your brain for a while. There are way better games to do that. Okay, it seems like the ceremony is coming to an end, with only one game left to talk about, the absolute winner for the very best game of 2023. But before we go ahead with the last winner, let's take a look at some honorable mentions of other awesome games released on 2023. Play the role, boys! Neon and Dust, a game about robot cowboys where you go on missions to get better equipment and money and improve your chances against the Big Four bosses. It's an action RPG with roguelite elements and procedurally generated levels where you must survive various western schemes like robbing a train, killing robotic desperados, sabotaging enemy bases, etc. Fun gameplay loop and tough as nails. Gumbrella. You come into your house to see your wife murdered and your child stolen, with only an umbrella-shaped shotgun to be seen. A story of revenge and redemption as only publisher Devolver can deliver. Gumbrella is a 2D action platformer where the movement is as smooth as the action on screen, and even though it looks like a Metroidvania, it actually isn't. Use your Gumbrella to kill baddies and monstrous abominations alike, solve puzzles and go on an adventure to save your stranded daughter. Fun in a small package. Cassette Beasts. Disappointed after playing Pokémon Scarlet and Violet? This is the game for you. Cassette Beasts is an RPG where you go around catching different beasts and turning their abilities and likenesses into music cassettes, so you can take their forms in battle. You can also fuse two different beasts, leading to a big number of combinations, and you can also romance some of the game's NPCs. Interesting story, beautiful pixel art, deep combat mechanics, and of course, awesome soundtrack. Sea of Stars, an RPG inspired by old-school classics like Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger. This game from Sabotage Studio, developer of Metroidvania masterpiece The Messenger, is sure to satisfy your RPG needs with an interesting story, well-crafted combat, charming characters, and one of the most beautiful art styles ever in a 2D game. And finally, Baldur's Gate 3, an outstanding experience that has already won multiple Game of the Year awards. This is an RPG that goes as deep as it gets. Using multiple mechanics inspired on Dungeons and Dragons like dice rolls and deep character customization, this is the ideal game for fantasy lovers. Lose yourself in a land of magical wonder, war, and random events so batshit insane that no two playthroughs of the game will be the same. Currently playing this one co-op with a friend, and the fun we are having messing around with the different choices, causing chaos and failing skill checks has no comparison. And now, the moment you have all been waiting for. And if you paid attention to the honorable mentions for a second year in a row, the result is as predictable as possible. The winner for the Plague Awards Best Game of 2023 is none other than The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Well, another year in a row that I have to repeat this, but what can I possibly say that hasn't been said before? Tears of the Kingdom is the long-awaited sequel for 2017's big hit Breath of the Wild, and the expectations for this game were through the roof. A lot of people were wondering how could Nintendo make a game even better and greater than Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom managed to improve on basically every aspect. This time around you have a better fleshed out story in which we see the return of a particularly muscular Ganondorf trying to take over the Kingdom of Hyrule using his corrupted dark energy. With a missing Princess Zelda, you have to explore Hyrule once again looking for clues and answers to this mystery. In your journey you'll meet a number of quirky characters, and yes, I know that was also the case in Breath of the Wild, but I felt this time around more care and love was put into these side stories. My favorite one of them all was working for a newspaper that was covering the disappearance of the princess, working together with a giant pelican reporter by talking to different people at the stables and helping shed some light over some mysterious appearances and Zelda sightings. However, as much as I liked the various side quests found around the kingdom, the development of the main story was greatly improved as well, since we are instructed to visit 4 different regions of the kingdom to help different tribes with their issues in a similar vein to last game, with the difference that temples are back. Sure, these are not the type of temples seen in previous games, but they are a huge improvement in comparison to those dull divine beasts in Breath of the Wild. The bosses have also seen a huge upgrade, as we have unique bosses in all the temples instead of 4 different types of element and Ganon. Oh, and I can't forget to mention the 2 entirely new areas of the game, which are the Sky Islands and the Depths. These areas are not just bonus places added for the sake of content, both have their own gimmick and individual mechanics, as well as moments when we'll have to visit such places in order to advance through the story. For me, the depths were the particular highlight, given that it was a challenge just to traverse the area, and especially at the beginning of your adventure, you're always in great danger of being totally obliterated by corrupted enemies and the oppressing atmosphere of the total darkness. The only thing that I didn't like was that you can't bring the skeleton horses to the surface and store them in a stable for regular use. One of the main improvements of the game was the implementation of Link's new abilities, the possibility of combining different things to make new weapons, shields, and types of arrows provided endless possibilities to experiment in battle, traversal, and puzzle solving. Ultra Hand gave players the ability to create different vehicles for traversal or combat, and players managed to get pretty damn creative with this feature. We also have Ascend, which allows Link to go through a solid structure directly above him, perfectly for those who lack a bit of stamina for climbing. And finally, Recall, which is basically the ability to rewind time for an object and return it to its original position. So this is literally... However, you know me, and not everything can be perfect in this wonderful journey. Weapon durability is still an issue in this game, and even though it was particularly mended with the fuse system to create weapons, it still manages to discourage you from using high-level weapons in normal combat, waiting to use them on powerful foes like bosses or mini-bosses. Speaking of which, while we have a better variety of bosses in this game, you can still see a lot of repetition, with each dungeon boss having a corrupted variant in the depths and multiple 3-headed hydras in the overworld, only with a different element each. Look, for a world this big, it's natural that some repetition happens, but I do believe some bosses could have been made specifically for the depths, like the frogs, instead of reusing the main bosses from the temples. Nevertheless, I do have to say that the final boss battle was one of the biggest improvements in this game. Given how disappointing Calamity Ganon was as a final boss, this iteration of Demon King Ganondorf has a fun, challenging, and spectacular battle that could easily position itself as one of the best boss battles of the year. Because of all of these reasons, I declare The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom as the best game of 2023. But I feel like I'm forgetting to mention something from the game. Well, that has been all for today, my patients. Do you agree with these choices for the Plague Awards? What was your personal favorite game of 2023? Let me know in the comments below. This has not been the best of years for me, but it sure was one of the best years for gaming. And for those who have reached this point in the video, I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the support with the channel and my videos. 2024 will be a year of evolution and big projects, so stay tuned for what's to come. And remember, one game a day keeps the Plague Doctor away. See ya!